I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar series of the Cybersecurity and Information Systems Information Analysis Center, CSIAC. Today's presentation is entitled Cybersecurity Arms Race, Modernizing the Arsenal. My name is Steve Warzala. I'm the CSIAC Outreach Manager. A few administrative notes before we begin. All phones have been muted except for the presenters. Questions may be asked at any time during the presentation by utilizing the chat function. And time permitting, your questions will be answered at the end of the session. Today's briefing slides will be posted on our website within a few days. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our sponsor, the Defense Technical Information Center, DTIC. The funding that DTIC provides enables CSIAC to conduct these webinars. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's webinar, Rob Chang. He's the CEO of PC Pitstop. Rob has over 30 years of experience in the computer industry, holding numerous positions and performing a variety of functions. Prior to founding PC Pitstop in 1999, Mr. Chang was the Senior Vice President at Gateway Computers, driving sales, marketing, and providing support worldwide. He began his career at Texas Instruments in the Data Systems Group, where he was responsible for the Latin American division. Rob holds a BS in engineering from Cornell University and an MBA in finance from the University of Texas. I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. Chang. Good afternoon, Rob. The floor is now yours.
Thank you very much. So the first modern ransomware was first saw in September of 2013, and that's when this chart really begins. In 2015, Lloyds, which is the bank out of London, estimated that $400 million was the value of cybercrime, was that 4 years ago. 2 years ago, the World Economic Forum estimated that $800 million was that same number. This year, Juniper Research out of the UK estimates that it will accelerate to $2.1 trillion. And Cybersecurity Ventures, which is the largest research firm out of Silicon Valley that studies cybercrime, estimates that number will grow to $6 trillion. So from 2013, we're essentially at zero to $6 trillion, and that is the size of the economy of the United Kingdom. So what this presentation will go over will be the history of malware and the history of our defenses to protect ourselves against malware. Because really what we are in is an arms race. The rate at which their technologies are that they are to attack us are greatly exceeding the technologies we're using to defend ourselves. So this presentation will go over 3 distinct eras. The first one being what was called the Mischief Error. It goes from the beginning of computing to about 2001. The actors were driven mainly by curiosity and mischief. At the defense, what we used, we didn't have any defenses, but our defenses would go and clean up the mess, and then the government was able to identify some of these people and punish them. The financial era, which began in 2002 and is still going today, the motivations have moved to money. And because money is driving it, the technologies that they're using continue to get better, and the frequency of attacks as we're experiencing. The defense, our defenses have actually moved recently away from technology and to more of a detect and respond, to be able to detect that we're being attacked and then to respond to it as opposed to trying to prevent it. The government had some early success prosecuting these people, but at this point in time, the government has not been able to apprehend or even find these people. The concern is that we'll go into a new era in the near future, and the motivations move away from money and to do harm and destruction. At that point in time, the government would be the target, and the detect and respond strategy would become a failure. Hello, my name is Rob Chang. I'm the CEO and founder of PC Pitstop. We're the makers of PCmatic, PCmatic Pro, and PCmatic MSP. I live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I'm the person that you see on television. So as I described, computing is so embedded in everything that we do at this point in time, and unfortunately the technologies we're using to protect ourselves are not accelerating at the same rate as as the bad guys are using the technologies they are to infect us. So let's go over the first error, which is the Mischief Error. As I was stated before, I was a senior vice president at Gateway Computers. In the mid-90s, our manufacturing operations were shut down because of a virus. What we did in manufacturing is that at Gateway, we did everything custom configured. So these were the servers that configured the software on the computers. We had to go and take that computer and mail it to our antivirus manufacturer. Once they received the computer, they analyzed it, they restored the server back to its original place, and then they added it to the blacklist, and then they gave us back the computer. And so that is the origin of really how antivirus software works. You have an infection, they go and analyze it, they were historically able to restore the computer back to its original form, and then they add it to the blacklist. We were able to, we were down for 2 weeks. I had the pleasure of telling Wall Street why we were off by 2 weeks out of the quarter on revenue. And at that point in time, Wall Street had never heard of a computer virus. Later on, we found that the virus was attributed to a teenager in the Philippines. In early 2000, there was another virus we'll talk about. It's called the I Love You virus. It was also called the Love Bug virus. It was the entire, it would actually go and it delete a few files, and it was estimated at the time that it hit 10% of the computers that were connected to the internet. It was attributed again to 2 young Filipino students, and they were arrested, but then they were released by their police. And the reason why was that there were no laws at that time against what they were doing. It was interesting because the way that the I Love You virus was distributed was mainly by social engineering and email, and that is actually how that viruses are still being propagated today. The next one is Kournikova. Shortly after that, there was another virus about Kournikova. She was a very popular and attractive tennis player back in that decade. And the main objective of this virus was mainly to propagate. It really did no harm other than propagate, slow down a lot of email servers, and millions of computers were in fact infected. The creator of the virus was a 20-year-old Dutch student. They found him, and he was sentenced to 150 hours of community service. One of the key things that happened during this era was also the 2 leaders in antivirus were McAfee and Symantec. And these 2 companies, almost at the same time, moved their research to the Philippines, and they moved their development to India. And when they did that, what they're trying to do is they're trying to minimize their costs. They're minimizing their costs of research and development. But by minimizing costs in research and development, they are also there's always a trade-off. Speed of response and innovation, I would say, would be 2 of the ones, and we really need that innovation right now. So innovation from these companies, because they're doing the research and development, they're trying to minimize the cost as opposed to trying to innovate. So this is really what the Mischief Error has brought us. It's brought us what we call the Blacklist antivirus. Most of the perpetrators we were able to be caught, and there wasn't a whole lot of damage from this era. But to highlight again, the Blacklist Architecture is then something has to get infected. Then once it's infected, then we have an analysis period. During the analysis period, it should also be possible to go and return the computer or server to its original form, and then the blacklist is updated. Once the blacklist is updated, then that list is gone to it's distributed to all the computers using that software, and then the virus stops propagating. The key point here is that this architecture is meant to stop a virus from propagating and not to prevent it from infecting in the first place. So now we've moved into the next era, which is the financial era. And during this, and we should note during this, the financial era and also the dawn of the internet are almost hand in hand. I mean, as soon as the internet, people started using the internet, we're using it more. This also opens the door for monetization. So the first thing was spyware. Spyware happened in 2003. It was exploiting a hole in Windows XP. And without doing anything, one could go to a website that had been infected, and it would start running the spyware. Once it started running the spyware, it would start popping all these ads all over the screen. So many ads that it would make the computer useless. It would make the computer very slow, and it would make it useless because there was no room to work because all the ads. On this slide there, it shows an actual spyware infection. McAfee and Symantec, who were the leaders at the time, they failed to detect this, and a whole cottage industry of anti-spyware products spread it out. Pest Patrol, Spy Sweeper, Adware, Spy Search, and Destroy. And actually, during that period of time, it was common knowledge that you needed both things. You needed an anti-spyware product and an antivirus product to effectively work during that period of time. Ultimately, Microsoft closed this hole. The drop-by download in XP Service Pack 3, and so they were able to do that. But at that point in time, I believe the genie was out of the bottle, and the era of malware and monetization had begun. The next thing that happened was called rogue security software, and this is, let's say, 2005, 2006. And what would happen is the software would be downloaded into your computer, and then it would say, you have a virus. And the only way that you could get rid of this phony virus was to actually pay them. And so they had some success with that. The next part of this presentation, which covers the time from 2005 to 2010, I'm going to attribute to a gentleman, his name is Brian Krebs. He was a reporter for the Washington Post studying cybercrime. And at one point, the Washington Post told him, Brian, you have to stop studying cybercrime because it's very dangerous. And rather than heeding the advice of his supervisor, he left the Washington Post and kept on studying cybercrime. Ultimately, he wrote a book called Spam Nation, and that's the book that I'm borrowing a lot of this information about to present to everybody. So if I was to rewrite the name of the book, Spam Nation, I would call it Russian Cyber Games. Most of this book takes place in Russia, and he talks about the Russian cybercrime syndicate. The book begins by talking about something called fake pharma. During that period of time, we were all inundated with a lot of spam that talked about all the pharmaceuticals that you could buy, and this was a real business. You could go and buy almost any pill by clicking on those emails without a prescription, and you would actually receive the pills. It was very illegal, and ultimately the government was able to shut them down because they were able to follow the money. But there were some things that they were able to figure out from the fake pharma that still continue to this day. The first one are botnets. So the book exposes that the largest botnets in the world during that period of time came from Russia. And what a botnet is a piece of software running a lot of computers, sometimes millions of computers, waiting for a single instruction. And so most of the time it's just sitting there waiting. But what the book shows is that it's used for two different things, and that's spam and DDoS attacks. What a DDoS attack is a denial service. So it asks all those million computers to go and send a bunch of information to a website. And when that information is all sent to the website, it becomes flooded with these superfluous requests and is unable to do what it's supposed to do, whether that's processing a transaction or just displaying a web page, and all that was attributed to the Russian botnets. The other one, which is probably the most important ramification from the fake pharma, is spam. The book shows that 80% of all email is from spam, and because of that, I mean, still today, this is going on, and the book postulates it's because of all the Russian botnets that they're able to deliver all this spam. We all have an impact. I mean, there's an impact to all the spam in this world, and that is through something called false positives. I think we've all had the experience that we have a valid email, but it shows up in our spam filter, and therefore it impacts all of our productivity. The next thing, and this was a really big game changer, was what they call the Department of Justice virus. This came in circa 2008, 2009. This one was a true virus. Once you were infected, your entire computer was locked. You could not get out, you could not do anything on that computer. If you tried to reboot the computer, it would come back to the screen. If you went back into safe mode, actually, in safe mode, you could actually get through. But it was very effective. This was really one of the first types of ransomware. Very cleverly, this was actually an actual screenshot here. There's a wallet there, and it shows you the payment methods using something at the time called MoneyPack. It was very sophisticated. It would open up your camera, and it would take a picture of you, so it made it feel like, in this case, the Department of Justice was really watching you. There were versions in the United States of this virus. There was the Department of Justice virus, the FBI virus, CIA virus. Then they went to foreign countries. So it was not just limited to the United States. They went into the UK, and they imitated the law enforcement agencies in the UK, and then they had to change the types of payment because these are all American types of payment. They went into France and Italy and Germany and even into Eastern Europe. So this was a worldwide phenomenon. The viruses could be removed, and most people know this if you boot in safe mode and then use a free remediation tool such as Malwarebytes or ComboFix. But this was a very big thing because they started making a lot more money because they're now figured out how to, number one, lock down the computer and then demand a form of payment. During this period of time, because the blacklist was so ineffective, we saw a whole slew of brand new foreign-made antivirus enter the marketplace from the United Kingdom, Slovakia, Estonia, Russia, Czech Republic, Romania, Japan, and so on. The one thing about this is that all of these foreign antiviruses were still made based on the same blacklist that I talked about before. Perhaps one of the most important innovations that we have to remember is the advent of the polymorphic virus. In this slide, I show a bunch of masks, and that's really, if you view a virus as trying to be wearing a mask every single time that it infects a computer, when it infects the next computer, it changes its mask. The way that a blacklist works is it's trying to define the mask, saying, okay, I know that mask, I'm not going to let it run. But a polymorphic virus says every single time I infect, I change my mask. So therefore, it essentially makes the blacklist obsolete, because by the time it gets on the blacklist, it's already changed the way it looks. It's always one step, the blacklist antivirus is always one step behind the polymorphic virus, because an infection happens. Once that infection happens, the analysis has to go on, and then it goes and it adds to the blacklist. By the time that is added to the blacklist, the mask has changed. This was a very important technical innovation of viruses, and this is part of what's driving our escalation. So one thing that we did do in order to improve our defenses, historically, even going back to the very beginning, is that everything was based on a scan and a clean, which means that you have to think you got a virus, or you should regularly scan and clean for a virus, and then it would clean it off. Something called real-time protection says, wait a second, if a virus is trying to enter your computer, or trying to execute on a computer, you can go and try to stop it through real-time protection. So this was a very good improvement, with the one problem is that it's still based on the same blacklist. So what it's trying to block is not on the list, but it's a good technology that we have. So another thing that's happened with antivirus companies is something called sample sharing agreements. Because of the polymorphic virus, the cost of running an antivirus company has escalated so much, because and you see this in a lot of slides from antivirus, saying there's this huge escalation in the number of viruses. The number of viruses is actually the same, but their work to categorize them is so much more, because for every infection, there's a new signature. So to combat that, the Blacklist antivirus companies have sample sharing agreements. So therefore, when a customer is infected by McAfee, that information is now and they confirm it's that it's an infection. That information, McAfee would then go and share that with all of their competitors, and vice versa. So it's not uncommon for a antivirus to share all of their samples and all of their data with 40 or 50 of their competitors. And another thing that's happened during the same period of time was the advent of something called VirusTotal. And this is a company that was bought by Google and is a repository for every known virus in the world. But now we have modern-day ransomware, as we all know, and this is what was driving it. The first one was in late 2013, so this is really the beginning of the escalation that I was showing before, and they have now two brand new technologies. The first one is encryption. Encryption is very significant because, one, it's very sophisticated encryption. They are now encrypting files rather than locking down a computer and trying to try to get back. Your files are now gone if you do not have the key. More importantly is the entire model of the blacklist is that, number one, they will add it to the, after post-infection, they can add that sample to the blacklist, but also that they can get the computer running the way it was running before. Now that the files are encrypted, that promise is now broken. So the blacklist is ineffective against this new technology introduced in 2013. The other one is cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrency brings anonymity, and this is critical because the anonymity means that when the ransom is paid, we will never be able to know who these people are on the other end, which means the government cannot, and they have not in the last 5 years, been able to go and identify and prosecute or incarcerate any of these perpetrators. And this has been going on for 5 years now. It's really up to us to defend against this because the government is not going to be able to find these people. And on top of this, the ransoms are rising. So I live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. In February 2016, the school system where my kids go to school, they paid the record ransom at the time of $8,000, and they got all their files back. And that's actually right at 3 years ago now. Right now, the ransoms go, on the low end will be $50,000, anywhere to $1 million. The price of a Bitcoin itself has gone from, when I made this thing, from $1,500 to $8,500 in 1 year's time. So the cost of getting infected is escalating as well. In addition to this, a new thing is malicious scripting. So in addition, people are calling this the future of ransomware. And in addition to the polymorphic virus and the Bitcoin and the encryption, they're now finding a way to attack without a file being involved. What they do is they try to go after a scripting engine such as PowerShell or MSHTA, and then they write a script, which is essentially a text file, to go and perform the ransomware. Because of these things, all of the traditional antivirus are unable to stop this. So what are we doing in response? The big one is backup and restore. So everyone's saying, well, we need a backup and restore, and I think it is a good practice to always back up and restore for a wide variety of reasons, but it is insufficient to combat ransomware. You have a piece of software that you do not want in your network. And so once that's in your network, and as I've shown, it keeps on getting smarter and smarter all the time. So what the ransomware is doing now is it's going and encrypting the backup. The other thing it can do is it can disable a backup. And actually, that's what I'm going to talk about, Atlanta. And the other thing is sometimes you're creating the data faster than you can back it up. And so therefore you're running risk there as well. So it's always good to back up, but to count on your backup as being the solution to ransomware is insufficient. So as an industry, we're moving to what they call next-gen antivirus, and that's detect and respond. And where we're moving with this is really they're not sure when something's going on in the network. It's not on a blacklist, but it still could be a virus. And so they're putting up alerts, and then everybody in IT has to run and define whether that alert is actually a virus that they've never seen before. These solutions are extremely costly in pricing, as well as that you need to have the manpower to do it. So it's only on the very high end of the marketplace people can go and afford these type of solutions. And then one, I would argue, you're also putting human error in this thing, where we really have one human error and then you have your entire network down. And so I believe that the thing we need to focus on is not detect and respond, but on prevention. But here we are, Blacklist antivirus. I mean, they say the best definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping that we get a different result, and that's what we're doing now. Actually, I mean, in the antivirus industry, people say, because we're not focused on prevention, only on reaction, that we're always going to get infected. I don't believe that, and I believe the infections will continue until we take a different approach. So let's talk about the Wannacry ransomware virus. This happened in May of 2017, so a little under 2 years ago. It was 200,000 computers infected in 150 countries and happened in 3 days. And this was not a sophisticated virus. It was not polymorphic. And more importantly than that, it had something called a kill switch, which most viruses do not have. The kill switch was discovered by a gentleman, I believe, in New York State. And once it was discovered, the kill switch was deployed and the virus stopped propagating. But the question that we all have to ask ourselves is, 200,000 computers and 150 computers, how many antiviruses did it get through? And best I can tell, it's all the Blacklist antiviruses that penetrated. So this is a valuable lesson. It takes more than 3 days to update the Blacklist. So if you have a rapidly propagating virus such as this, the Blacklist is wholly insufficient, and I don't even want to think about it. If someone didn't find that kill switch, where we would be as a society. So this is me. I give a lot of presentations. This one is in Yankee Stadium. And I'm giving presentation to IT professionals, and I'm going to talk about what happened in Atlanta, and I asked for a raising of hands of how many knew what was going on in Atlanta, and amazingly enough, nobody knew. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened in Atlanta. Actually, this presentation I don't have. So what happened in Atlanta? What happened in March of 2018? It happened a little less than a year ago. And they were affected with a 2-year-old ransomware that they were unable to stop. The police videos and body cam videos were all lost. The court docket, they were unable to go, and the court docket was all blocked. Online payments were suspended, and the police had to issue paper tickets. The ransom was $51,000. And Atlanta was out at somewhere around $17 million, and that does include all the time and embarrassment of doing it all. What I've learned from this thing about Atlanta is almost everybody else is paying the ransom. The news about Atlanta is that they ought to have paid the ransom. But the question I have for everybody, and this is the thing that's going on, is what antivirus did Atlanta have? Nobody knows, and I think that's a really good piece of information, because if you're running a major city or something and you're using that same antivirus, then I think you're running the same risk of infection. So this is, I mean, in airplane crashes, the government gets involved and they analyze every single thing that happened with that airplane crash. They analyze the pilots and whether it's state of mind, the black box, the weather, and everything about it. And then they do something very important. They make all that information public. And the reason why they do that is so we can have less airline crashes. We do not do that in the antivirus industry. When we have these infections, we need to be learning from them, and we're not. So I want to talk about another gentleman that I met. I met him 1 year ago. His name is Jeff Gaynor. He had a very distinguished career in the military and also later on as a public servant in the federal government. his last career, he was the CEO of InfraGard. It was a partnership between the FBI and the private sector to exchange information related to our nation's critical infrastructure. Jeff is now the CEO of something called American Resilience. This is a nonprofit. And Jeff is a resident of Atlanta, Georgia. And he wrote something which I'm going to talk about when he was at InfraGard called A Predator's View. So when everything was happening in Atlanta in March of last year, I called Jeff. And I said, Jeff, do you see what's going on in Atlanta? He said, yeah. And he said, he was kind of nervous. He said, they are watching. And then it dawned on me. So everything that was happening in Atlanta, this is the mayor of Atlanta. She went on national television and talked about the ransomware infection. And what Jeff meant by they are watching is that the people who wanted to do us harm, they're watching to how we respond to these things. Everything that happened in the city of Atlanta, to the police department, to the court dockets, all that was public information. There's lots of video, there's lots of articles being written about it, and these people are watching us. The people not who want to infect us more, the people who want to do us harm. So this is what Jeff, and I encourage everyone to read it. If anyone wants a copy of it, I can send it to you. Jeff wrote this while he's still working for the government. It's called A Predator's View. And what he's saying is that it took 5 years for the perpetrators of 9/11 to plan that attack, to attack in one day. And what A Predator's View is saying is that rather than attack our buildings, they're going to hit our networks. And they are planning right now. So one of the things that happened in Atlanta is that the mayor went on television and said, if anybody has done any transactions with the city of Atlanta, if you paid your water bill, if you went and you paid a police ticket, to go check your bank accounts. Now, ransomware doesn't do that. It's not to say that they can't do that in the future, but right now, ransomware, and this was a 2-year-old one, there is no evidence that was true, but they were basically putting all the people in the city of Atlanta in a panic. So I went and I called Jeff, and I said, Jeff, what's going on? He says, it's escalating. And what he says is escalating is the damage now to the city of Atlanta is larger than the actual physical damage of the information because people are getting in a panic. And remember, people are watching. What we have is a massive security hole. We have a massive security hole in this Blacklist antivirus. Every single computer that is protected nowadays, including Windows Defender, every single antivirus is based on a Blacklist that's very reactive and insufficient against ransomware and polymorphic viruses. There is an alternative, and that's the Whitelist. So they call it the Blacklist. There is a way to do something, and that's called the Whitelist. A whitelist, and I'm using the analogy here of an A-list celebrity event. If you think about it, first it starts with a list. It's a list of people that are allowed in, not people that are not allowed in, people allowed in. And then you have security. You have to go and validate who you are, that person, and then you have to go by security. If you go and you deserve to be in the event, but you are not on the list, you don't get in. You have to wait. And then once you wait, you have to, hopefully you can get in back on the list, and then you can validate through security. But there is a waiting period if you're not on the list. And that is how a whitelist works. But whitelisting has failed. So whitelisting has failed. Actually, an interesting tidbit of information is that the city of Atlanta was trying to implement a whitelist. Back then, it was called application control. Application control, basically, it worked side by side with antivirus, and it gave IT all the ability to go and control everything that was run on their network, from innocuous things like solitaire to blocking out everything else. The problem, it was so hard to install and so hard to maintain that it never got any traction in the marketplace. So the solution is to have a global whitelist, the same way that we really now have a global blacklist, as I told you, because of all these sample sharing arrangements, is to create a global whitelist of all the good applications in the world. The one downside, and this is an important thing to know, is there is a downside to whitelisting, but I think the trade-off is more than adequate, is false positives. False positives are calling a good application bad. So when that happens in the workforce, that means that some people are unable to get some of their work done some of the time until they can remediate the false positive and actually say this is a good application. But that's a lot easier to deal with than ransomware running through your network and bringing down all your servers. So I think the trade-off is there, but there will always be false positives in a whitelist world. But on the other side, there are no false negatives, which is calling a bad file good. So it solves a lot of the problems. Whitelisting solves the problems of polymorphic viruses, keyloggers, ransomware, advanced persistent threats. These are threats that, where the threat is, the target is identified and you're only trying to get for that one target. For example, leaving a USB stick with some malware in an office and hoping somebody puts it in and getting the network that way. But whitelist also has other applications beyond just malware. Really, there are two problems in cybersecurity today. Number one is software running on a network, and the other one is people on a network. And that's where we're seeing, the combination of those things. But whitelisting also can be used also for unauthorized access, which is people getting into a network. Right now, so a whitelist, people getting a network, it starts actually with a whitelist. You're trying to authorize all the people that you want to allow into a network. The problem is you have a username credentials, and it is inadequate to identify that person. And as I'll hear some security holes in it. Actually, one is back 10 years ago, the vice president candidate Sarah Palin was hacked by a 20-year-old student because of her security questions. Because she was a famous figure at that point in time, this person was able to guess her security questions and then was able to read her email. She was actually quite fortunate because they were really trying to hack her email just to embarrass her, and so there was no real financial downside to what happened. But security questions, that's one. Just recently, a government agency was hacked because people frequently put their username password on sticky notes. That's also, and phishing, that is another hole in there. And so there's another, but how whitelisting can solve this problem is by using had two whitelists, one for people and one for devices. So you're saying for this person, you can whitelist a device, and unlike a person, you can't spoof a device. There's something in every device called a GUID, which stands for Globally Unique Identifier. So although you can spoof a person, you cannot spoof a device. And so you're now making a whitelist of devices, and we can close that security hole using whitelisting. And this is already happening. You're seeing it right now. Netflix uses device authentication. Google's using, Gmail is using it. And so just to get it, so it's more widely used beyond just Gmail and Netflix for all security to make these technologies available to everybody. So all the IT people in the room, I think that we have to change. We've been doing too many of the same things and trying to mitigate risk, but we really need to accept some risk and to be able to accept change. And lastly, I want to say that I believe the technology should be made in America. Right now, all of these attacks, we don't know who they are, but we do know they're all coming from outside the country. So Made in America enables us to have the skills for the cyber war and also speed of response. So Made in American companies will be able to respond to these threats quicker. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed the presentation about the history of malware and the history of antivirus. Thank you, and I'm not sure if there's any time for questions, but I'm happy to take some.
Okay, thanks for the presentation, Rob. It's very interesting. We got a late start, so we'll try to take a couple of questions. So. I was kind of curious there at the end of the presentation. You were talking about the whitelist and then using both a person's IDing the person and also IDing the device. because you can't spoof the device. So I guess one question there is, what would the situation be like? What would happen if if it's a mobile device, that falls into somebody else's possession? Does that kind of, break the, break the security there if somebody else can actually physically get their hands on that device?
If they could physically get the hands on the device, and they have to know the username and credentials. If they know both of those things, that would be a security hole still. But so the way I'm looking at it is you have to look at the size of the hole. Right now, we have a glaring hole in user credentials that is being abused on a daily basis. And by doing this, that is a security hole, but the size of that security hole is significantly smaller than what we have today.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. So, kind of curious if you have kind of thoughts or opinions on some of the advanced technologies that are kind of hitting the forefront now. So like artificial intelligence and the machine learning, how do you see those possibly playing into this into this situation here? Do you have some insights on those technologies?
Yes, I do. I would say this. A lot of this has all come up in the last 5 years. Machine learning, artificial intelligence. And I can say this. One is that we are not seeing the benefit of it. I mean, the number of infections, if they were helping, we would not see the chart that I showed, the first slide of the escalation. We would be adopting these technologies faster. And then the other one I would say is that on the antivirus side, I mean, it's being used quite a bit as, a marketing term, but it's not showing up in test results. Because all these products, they can be tested, and we're not seeing those results, the benefit of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and test results from A/B tests, A/B comparatives, virus bulletin, these testing agencies.
Okay. I know a lot of times with the machine learning, a lot of times, what's required is to have a large data set that that they can use to learn what they're looking for. Do you think it's a situation where there's not enough data, or folks haven't run the data against it, or?
I don't know. I mean, we have gone down the road, my company, of going down whitelisting. I can tell you that is highly effective. We do well in tests and they're selling this other alternative, but it's hard for me to know where their weaknesses are.
Okay. Now with whitelisting, with like a 0-day type of attack, does whitelisting prevent a 0-day from hitting you, or is that something that could still get through using the whitelist approach?
No, whitelisting stops everything. I mean, it stops everything. Actually, I mean that's the key point for it's the architecture. And the whitelisting architecture is meant to go and overcompensate by having some false positives, but it makes sure that not one bad thing gets through. And so, including 0 days, advanced persistent threats. So if you obviously there was one a bank got hit with and the software they wrote was just for that bank. And so things like that would never show up on a blacklist until it's too late. The whitelist solves all those problems.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully that that approach will be implemented more here in the future, and start to increase the improve the defensive posture of folks, and increase the safety of the online users. So we are kind of at the end of our time today, but once again, I do want to thank you for taking time out of your day and sharing your experience and expertise with us. We appreciate that, and thanks for sharing this information with our audience. We do appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Okay, I just want to. I'll make a quick mention of our next webinar in February. It's going to be on the 21st of February, and that one is going to be. The topic is going to be more in the software area. We're going to be looking at DevOps and some of the talking about some of the new tools and techniques that are kind of hitting the market these days, and so we'll kind of do an analysis of that and try to give you some information on that. So hopefully you can, if that's of interest, you can join us next month, and hope everybody has a good day out there. Thanks.